from your sort of perspective, now that you're looking at all three, the world of business, the world of politics, the world of trade unionism, what do you see as the sort of common denominators with all three of them?
People.
Sure.
I'll elaborate. Yeah, I mean, look, I think people is the big part of all three of those things, and all three are done better when they are done at the service of people and they're done with people, and all three ultimately want to deliver the best for the highest volume of people, and that's how all three of those things will be successful, and even more so if all three of them, are doing that collaboratively with each other and the people that they are there to serve.
Hadi Naqvi from Usdaw.
Everyone, it's me, Syed Hadi Naqvi, the UK's TUC Organising Award winner of 2024. Now, I love saying that. That is a real proud achievement. But today, on this episode of Unmatched, I am really proud to introduce my guest. Now, this particular podcast focuses on the world of trade unionism, business, and politics, and how closely intertwined they all are with one another. And more importantly, we try and delve through a lot of the things that people miss. Grassroots politics is one of the big things which is out there. And what I want to do is showcase someone who has been exceptional in this area of grassroots politics. This isn't what the media tends to introduce, where you see the actual stuff in the Houses of Parliament, because a lot of the times people will go to their local politicians to try and sort out local issues. And that helps to build up a lot of trust within the person who's representing them. Guest today, I'm really excited to introduce. He was a parliamentary candidate for Croydon South. He narrowly lost out to the Conservative candidate, Chris Philps, who won that seat. This guy has carried on. He's got nothing but resilience and tenacity and has continued and is now going to be the candidate for local Labour Party councillor for Thornton Heath Ward. I'm really proud to introduce today my guest, Ben Taylor. How are you doing today, Ben?
I'm really good, Hadi. Thank you so much for having me on. Really excited to have a chat with yourself and talk about a lot of those things that you mentioned. I think it's really important. There is such a close link between trade unionism and politics. Most politics is built from trade unionism, from people coming together. I think some of the biggest shifts we've seen in politics across the globe has happened because you've seen large groups of people come together and mobilize and push for change. And I can't think of anything that embodies trade unions better than that. And business and politics, of course, is also very much interlinked. Without businesses, any economy is going to suffer and ultimately fail. And politics has to be there in the service of people. And we see lots and lots of people in many ways in business. So yeah, I'm really, really excited today to have a chat and maybe give you some insights into my story and how I got here, and answer any questions you've got.
It's funny that you said that, because that is exactly what I was going to ask you next. So, just your journey. And now, when I heard your journey when I was out there campaigning for you, because you would sometimes go on the Zooms and talk to all the campaigners and the activists, your journey was actually one of inspiration. And what I'd rather do is discuss that side of things, because that in many ways formed your reason why you got into the world of politics. Would you like to tell us about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look. So about myself or about my journey into politics?
Yourself before you got into politics, because you mentioned a lot of the challenges that you went through growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really see it as at the time as challenges. It's not really until you kind of look back on your life later on and you realise what you were going through wasn't the kind of standard that everybody else went through. But I was raised by a young single mom on benefits. We didn't have a lot of money for many years when I was younger. I remember we spent several years living in temporary accommodation, moving from bed and breakfast to bed and breakfast. It comes with a certain level of insecurity, like living that life. And as a father now, I can only imagine how tough it must have been for my mum going through that. And some of the places that we lived, funnily enough, some of those are really the best memories for me. There was a real sense of, I don't know, togetherness that my mum and I had when we were going through all of those different things. And I have obviously some wonderful memories from those times as well, though, tough as they were. And especially that feeling, as I said, of insecurity, of not knowing where you're going to be next, of, living in really different levels of accommodation, from places that had, leaks throughout to actually some pretty nice places, though almost always, relatively small and cramped. And then we moved into our first kind of real family home when I was about 8 years old, and by that point, I had two younger brothers, and that was a real difference for me. And again, gave me a real sense of belonging for the first time that I'd had in a really long time. Unfortunately, my mum did pass away when I was young, and we were actually living in that house. And then my nan, who was a absolutely amazing woman, also, she stepped in and then raised these three young boys. But again, in doing so, really sacrificed a lot of her life, and what that meant was we continued to live on benefits. We continued to really not have any money in the house. I remember there were times on a Sunday evening when the money in the electricity meter would run out, and we didn't get the benefit top up, I suppose, until the Monday morning, and we'd have to do things by candlelight, play Monopoly by candlelight and things like that. And that was a real defining years for me. Of course, I was very lucky in some ways. I think if I was living that same life now, it would be much harder for me and my family to break out of that, because the opportunities that were there for me as a young adult underneath the Labour government aren't there anymore. Even things like the opportunity to get out of temporary accommodation. We were in temporary accommodation for quite some time, but if you look at the difference between then and now, people get stuck in temporary accommodation for a generation sometimes. Maybe that's a little bit much, but really quite a long time.
You'd be surprised. It is going on generations at the moment.
Absolutely. So then as I kind of, I suppose, came of age, it was also the introduction of a Labour government for the first time in, I think, my lifetime. And, again, I didn't know it at the time, but the changes that they made opened up doors to me that weren't available before. And I don't think are available to a lot of people now, at least, we've started to see some change. Yeah. So that was kind of my early years, and then I moved into kind of the corporate world and started working after going to college. And again, it was a real time of growth, a real time of opportunity and optimism across the country. And that was really my main focus for many years, just focused on business and focused on, I suppose, my personal finances and, moving to be successful in the world that I was operating in. And then living in Surrey for a lot of that, about 6 years ago, I moved to Croydon with my wife, bought a house together in Croydon, and it was not too long before the COVID pandemic happened. Croydon was very different to where I was living before. He wanted to do more in the community. I wanted to get a bit more involved in some of the things that I'd seen impact people a lot more. I'd heard a lot about things like food banks, but at the time I'd never been to one. I didn't know really what they were like. I had this image in my head of like a Dickensian type workhouse. So I went and volunteered at a local food bank, and what I saw just completely changed my opinion of what these places were. It was normal people, working people quite often, who were using them. A lot of the older generation were being forced to use these spaces, and I think little things like that just kind of start to shift how you see the world a little bit. I then started doing a big collection where I would go around to local residents in Coulston, picking up parcels that I would take to food banks on like a I think I used to every Sunday. So I was doing that when the pandemic hit, and we started creeping towards what looked like it was going to be a lockdown. And I posted a message out on social media saying, I'm doing this at a local level here. I'd like to expand it if things go, people need more support with the lockdown, et cetera, et cetera. And then someone reached out to me and said, we're trying to do something like this across the borough. Would you like to get involved? And so me and I think 4 or 5 other people at the time had this call where we spoke about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. There was, groups of these mutual aid groups were popping up all over the country. Kind of national network was being created. So me and these 4 or 5 other people, one of whom, funnily enough, was Rowena Davies, who is now the mayoral candidate for Labour in Croydon. It basically came together and then, sort of reached out to people through Facebook and WhatsApp, etc. We managed to distribute something like 120,000 leaflets all across Croydon to, hopefully every single door in Croydon. And we got 3,000 volunteers together, and we basically spent the next sort of 6 to 12 months helping people who'd been impacted by lockdown and, the extended food poverty that happened because of COVID. And that put me into the communities in a way that I'd never been before. I was engaging with communities across Croydon, quite a lot in parts of Croydon that I wasn't that weren't that well known to me, places like Thornton Heath and Broad Green, New Addington. And again, I saw the communities that existed. I came out of that 12 months with a completely different mindset. And it shifted me, and a lot of people around the world, of course, but it shifted me in ways that, it's hard to measure, but I had a totally different outlook on life.
Hey content creators, this is my chance to do a quick review of a product I bought on a TikTok shop, and I think you guys are going to love it. It's a green screen disc that fits on the back of a chair. It can fit to almost any surface, and if you've got a area like a flat or a single bedroom or a bed set where you're living in where you've got no space, this is ideal for those who are using it for things like Twitch, streaming, or just general YouTube videos. Like so. So get yours in the TikTok shop today. I'll leave the link in here.
At the same time, my daughter Imogen was born, and I think, again, the combination of, the global shift that had happened, my time in the community, probably spending more time giving than I really had, like serving others, than I'd ever historically done. And then, Imogen joining us and lighting up our life in many ways completely shifted. And that, I suppose, was the path that led me into, how can I serve more people? What can I do to make sure that, I'm being as impactful with my time as I can to help as many people as possible. And that, I suppose, then led me down the path of looking at local government and national government, and led me to our journey today.
Tell me about the business that you've done. What was the sector that you was in at the time?
Well, so I've mainly worked in marketing over the years. So I started in different formats. So I started off working in newspapers many years ago, and then I moved into digital marketing, and that was really where I've spent the majority of my kind of my career, I suppose. So working up for big agencies up in the city.
With the changes that you saw there, because I've always seen that you've been ahead of the curve in more ways than one. With the digital marketing side, did that give you that sort of, I don't know, continuous professional development all the time? Or was it a matter of, look, I've learned these skills, I don't need to learn any more, I've got enough as it is?
Definitely not that. I'm always see myself as a really a big student. I have a passion for reading. I don't get as much time as I used to, unfortunately, but I love reading, and I actually I'm not sure if it's there's different schools of thought about the best ways to learn things. Some people say, take great books, try to read them multiple times, because every time you read the same book, you take something new from it. Others talk about kind of reading en masse. But there was 1 year, I think it was like 2015 probably, where I read 50 books in a year. My goal was to do one a week, and I just missed out, unfortunately, and that was because one of them, I remember in the middle, was a really big chunky book. But yeah, so a lot of that, sort of personal development is really how I've tried to grow and expand that skill set over time. Um, Pushing your boundaries, learning from other people around you. I think there's no such thing as a bad personal development book, be that self-help or business development or skills, because I tend to find that even books that don't, even if you don't think 90% of the content is valuable, there's almost always something in a book that you can pull out from it. And I think the same is true of people, even people who might be a little bit inexperienced in certain areas. It might be, they come with no ideas. So I think it's really important to always try and be open to, um, again, new ideas and new ways of looking at things, and never think that you've got all the answers, even if you have been, very experienced with something. I also think one of the big things for me, so, I got involved in digital marketing at a time when it was evolving really rapidly. And, over a 10-year period, from an afterthought for people who were looking at, working with a newspaper, the digital edition or element of the newspaper was, just completely disregarded and considered something that was okay, I'll do it if it's there, through to, I don't know how many years later, it being almost flipped and reversed, where, it's being on the internet that people now see as the most important part. And, things like print media are seen as a bit of an afterthought for people. And I can only see that trend continuing. So that, I think, forces you to be in a position where you are constantly learning and developing, because it's constantly changing. And if you want to be seen as an expert in this field, then you have to be, slightly ahead of the curve. And that means, development, training and learning.
And you've put this to great use, especially during your campaigning, where you amalgamated all the techniques of digital marketing as well as face-to-face, because there is a criticism of digital marketing that people buy from people, and it's very difficult when you're doing it digitally to have that personal interaction. It's like listening to a singer on a CD versus when they're live. But you managed to transcend that because you managed to mobilize and organize effectively when you was out there campaigning. And what was the challenges that you faced with doing this?
Great question. What was the challenges I faced when doing this? I mean, look, I think first of all, on the substance of the point, I think every candidate has different skills and experience that they bring with them. I definitely agree. Yeah, my digital marketing experience helped because, getting, you know, getting over a message in a short amount of space or time can be really useful. Understanding of the digital tools that are available out there to engage with a mass of people was really useful. But I didn't have a lot of political experience, whereas a lot of people that you see running do. Even really my community work, a lot of the candidates had been working in the community for a long time. So yeah, that definitely helped. But then there were other areas that I was learning from other people from, and continue to do so. Even as a candidate now in the local elections in Croydon, we've got some amazing candidates who are running across the seats who have got all different sets of experience coming from all different spaces. So yeah, and then so challenges, I suppose, is that bit of partially you don't know what you don't know, right? So my campaigning experience going into the general election as a prospective parliamentary candidate was limited. There's so much I know now that I didn't know when I started on that journey. The party were amazing when it came to training and development, but they had hundreds of candidates they needed to do that for. Some of the kind of bigger away weekends where we went and spent time together and had learning, workshops, etc. You can only do so many of those because you've got so many people to come for, but it was great. So I think probably the biggest challenge was my inexperience really going into the general election, because it's so different from a local election, and so many of the things that you need to do, I just didn't realize. And again, kind of as you network more with other candidates and you start to get more advice from the party, you pick up on a lot of that stuff, and the end of the campaign versus the beginning of the campaign was night and day different. But yeah, so that was something that I had to really pick up on and learn along the way.
Now, you talked about your early life as a big influence on you, especially the Blair and Brown years and the impact that they had in terms of resource allocation and stuff like that. But what was the actual turn, as well as doing your mutual aid drives for food? What was the big turning point that changed you to say, okay, look, I can only do so much in this capacity. I now need to go into this arena. What was that moment that said, right, I will take that decision?
Do you mean community work to politics,
Community work to
or?
politics, yeah. Because politics is still, from my point of view, politics is still community work in more ways than one, especially grassroots politics. But now you're putting yourself into a position where you can actually make real changes. You are a decision maker, not just in one area, but you're dealing with more people, especially with people that may not vote for your party, but they're still living in your constituency. So what made you take that sort of shift, that jump?
I don't know that there was ever a, like, as you say, in my mind, the two things are so intrinsically linked. I don't ever think there was a decision point of like, I can no longer do this community work. I no longer do work in the community because I want to be a politician. It was more because of how much work I'm doing in the community. I want to be able to, you know, have more of a, be able to influence the things that are impacting the community more and more. What are the mechanisms to do that? And one of those is politics. There are others, starting and working in a charity, for example, or think tanks. There's lots of different ways that you can do it. Yeah, and so that kind of where it happened for me. It was always an extension of doing it. I think politically, I'm also a member of the Co-op Party, and I think the that again, that community first approach to politics is something that really aligns with my values and the reason that I do what I do, and I put so much time and effort into it. So yeah, I don't know that there was ever a moment where I thought that. I just thought, right, where is the avenue? And actually the political side of it was quite organic, throughout that mutual aid time in 2020, by pure kind of coincidence, so many of the people that I engage with through mutual aid, working and getting out in the community, ended up being Labour Party members or councillors. Yeah, I mentioned Rowena Davis being on one of those early, that sort of first planning call. That was complete coincidence. There was no, that wasn't by design. Lots and lots of the people that ran the WhatsApp groups across the borough were led by, Labour councillors. And again, I had no Labour network or very, very little Labour network in Croydon at that time. So it couldn't have been by design. It just so happened that they were all kind of the natural community-based leaders that kind of working would align itself with. And so because of that, I made lots of connections with, Labour councillors, Labour activists, Labour members, and I saw the amazing work they were doing in the community. And that was what I then thought, again, continue to work alongside them doing. And naturally at the end of that is, well, maybe not the end, but along that path is then, okay, well, shall we try and have an official kind of channel to do that? Shall we try and influence the.
Hey everyone, I got this massage gun from TikTok shop. I'm doing a quick review on it. So you have the gun itself, 4 different heads, and they're all worth it. Easy to fit on heads, easy to turn on, and different settings. So whatever kind of job you do, warehouse, driving, if you're coming back from the gym, hard day at work, this is ideal. And easy interchangeable. Even massaging, different muscle groups, different settings. And if you put more pressure on it, it will put more pressure on the muscle too. And this is really good value for money. I got it from the TikTok shop and you won't regret it. Costs less than £20. Compared to Amazon, over 50. So get yours on a TikTok shop today.
The levers of power from the inside rather than from the outside. And again, there's pros and cons of doing it either way. You know, you have a lot more freedom when you're just working in the community and you can, you know, move in the ways that you want to do, but you might maybe, you know, you're maybe one step further from the decision making, not necessarily the power. And I know that a big part of what you're talking about here is grassroots politics. And, you know, grassroots politics and grassroots power is created by lots of people in an area coming together, looking to achieve something. And I think that we should have more, because such a strong community, such a strong civic society that exists in Croydon. And I think there is so much power in that.
This is absolutely fascinating because, again, you know, there's a lot of things that people don't see behind the scenes because they don't see, they'll hear about it, but they don't actually understand what it's like until they're actually in it. And you've talked about throwing yourself into it. So I'm gonna put a question to you, that when you first went out door knocking, what was that feeling like? Going up, knocking on a door, and actually talking to a member of the public.
So I hadn't done much canvassing before becoming a candidate, because again, as I said, that sort of all happened during lockdown. So I'd done some, but not a huge amount. And I don't really remember my first door. What I do remember is my first door as a candidate. I remember the first door I knocked on when I had like a leaflet in my hand that had my picture on it. And again, unlike most people who do tend to do a lot more, they'll do a lot of that before getting in. I was a bit more inexperienced. That was a very strange feeling because, you know, even though my experience was limited, when you're knocking on someone's door to talk about someone else, you know, it's a much easier conversation to have. It feels like there's a lot less jeopardy attached to it. But so while I don't remember my first door, my first, you know, my early experiences of canvassing, I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. It was just a really different way of just talking to people. And I was surprised at how open people were with the conversations that they would have with you, you know, and people were very willing to, you know, talk about the issues that they had locally. They were really willing to give you, to have these conversations. And because, you know, the background I was from, which is very non-political. Of course, politics influences things every day, but I didn't really have that many people that I would really talk about genuine politics and the impacts of it. I might have spoken about stuff that was happening in the news, and, you know, obviously Brexit was a big thing for several years. So those kind of high-level conversations might have happened. But what has the government or the local council actually done in this area? But, you know, very little. Yeah, having those kind of conversations early on was really, it was really insightful. I really enjoyed it, and I, you know, to this day, you know, I'm a campaigner. Like, I love being out there canvassing, talking to people. It is my favorite part of. I mean, part of that's because I've been a candidate so many times now, but you know, I still love it. And you know, we spoke about the 2024 result, obviously devastating, and you know, it was, you know, really tough to lose and to cut the majority by so much. But at the same time, it fills me with so much pride when I think about how much work we did, how many people got involved, where, you know, the result, while not the one we wanted, was still an absolutely phenomenal result. And even knowing, you know, everything I know now, and even if I knew the result was going to be exactly the same, I'd do it all again tomorrow. I'll be.
Well, your resilience is something that's inspired people like myself to go out there and do things, come out of the comfort zone. Because you know, I came out of campaign with you in Thornton Heath Ward at one point, and you actually taught me some more little bits and pieces along the way. How does it feel to give back in that sense to other people who are campaigning with you at the same time? You know, you didn't walk off and just leave us to it. You was there to guide, mentor, chip away the edges, and refine it. Do you feel that, you know, is that something that should be done by candidates most of the time, or do you think that's something that, no, if you're campaigning, you learn along the way?
I don't think there's any, you know, should be. You know, I can't comment on that.
That's right. I think that was I think that was a controversial question there.
Yeah. But look, you know, I think passing down the information and supporting other people and helping people on their journey, you know, that is a big part of it. And it is something that I do see from a lot of our local activists and councillors and candidates. It is all about bringing people up and bringing people through. And yeah, it's not something that I think is unique to me at all. But I definitely love doing it, and being a candidate and moving towards getting into a role in a more official capacity is obviously a part of the journey that I'm on. But I don't do it for that reason. I don't do politics. I'm not part of the community to get into politics. I'm in politics to be part of the community, and that is the same in the Labour community as it is in the community of the borough of Croydon, as it is in the community of the UK. Of course, we can only have so much impact, and there's only so much we can do. But yeah, regardless of that element, I want to be out there helping and supporting people. And if I were not lucky enough to be one of the 3 people who had been privileged to be selected as a candidate for Thornheath, and I hadn't got through, I would still be in there helping wherever I could, because again, that I see as a really enjoyable part of the journey that I'm on.
I suppose passion comes in an awful lot when it comes to these kinds of things, because that helps with getting through the dark days. And you've campaigned literally in darkness at times. What pushes you to keep going out there time and time again? When it's cold, when it's dark, when it may be wet, you are constantly motivating people to get out there. What's your drive?
The first thing that comes to my head when you say that, I helped out. I volunteered at a charity in Croydon called Nightwatch, who are there to help. They help homeless people, and they feed them. They do more than that. Sorry, there's a lot of support offices that they do. They food and signposting. But a big part of what they do is every night they will go outside in the streets of Croydon. It used to be outside the council offices, and they'll hand out sandwiches and food and things like that. And there was a time when I was there, and so it's 9:30, 10 o'clock on a Sunday evening. It was very dark. It was cold, and I heard a young baby crying in the queue. And I sort of looked over, and there's a child there who must have been about the age of my daughter at the time, who I think must have been, around a year or so old, back in the queue. And normally get wait people through, but one of the volunteers took a banana over to her, and she was so grateful, and she could tell how hungry she was and how grateful she was for this banana. And I remember thinking at the time, I got quite upset, and I thought of my daughter at home who has a banana every morning, or had banana at the time every morning. And it's not even something that we think about. She just has a banana every morning, and it's just part of her daily ritual. I'm not saying that she's spoiled, but she doesn't have that same level of gratitude for as that young girl did. And I just thought, like, how do we live in a nation that has so much wealth, and there's a girl in a queue, so desperate for food that she's crying for, and that's a response to a banana. Stories like that keep me going, because the more we can do to tackle the crises that cause those issues, the better a nation we will be. And if I can be a small part improving the lives of people like that, then I'll feel like I've achieved something. And if that means, getting out there when it's dark and wet and windy and rainy, then that's what I'm going to do.
It's very similar to my sort of motivations when I was going to the trade union movement, which was to ensure that the workers were not treated badly by people that thought that it was their name on the door rather than the company that they were working for. Bringing about change was not easy. It took a lot of time, battles, and sometimes you have to battle against people that were within your own organization. And that's what kind of led me to the world of politics as well, because trade unionism has very much a hand in hand, especially with the Labour Party, because trade unions created the Labour Party in response as part of Charterism and the Tories, to ensure that side was represented within Parliament and change legislation. What has been your sort of experience within the trade union movement? I know that when I first campaigned with you, there was a weekend where I ended up bringing around 20 plus people from the trade union I'm a part of to your campaign day on a Saturday morning with Steve Reed MP and yourself. I got a
Yeah.
massive round of applause for it. It was like, oh my God. Not Had someone recorded that, I would have been like, yes, this is heaven. But your sort of experience, what have you felt with trade unionists who can be quite alpha in their personalities?
Indeed. I remember that morning well, actually, to talk to that very quickly. And there was a lot of us already there. And you came and it was a busy morning, but you came around the corner. You had all of your like coloured high vis jackets on, and it reminds me of like a Lord of the Rings type moment when you see the people coming over the hill on their horses to save the day. So thank you very much. It also wasn't the only time that you came. I mean, look, my experience with the trade union movement has only ever been positive. From when my family, there was some, one of my relatives had issues with an employer, and trade union stepped in and helped straight away, to being part of groups that have helped to organize for movements to support nurses and things like that. you know, we've seen some amazing stuff. So we've got Croydon University Hospital up there, which has got a lot of trade union members in there, and some big campaigns have really achieved some positive outcomes for them. I had huge levels of support from various trade unions, throughout the parliamentary campaign. And subsequently, so always been really positive, always been really great. I think probably one of my I don't know if regrets is the right word, because it's short, but one of the things that I would love to be able to do more of is work more with our trade unions, and help to create a stronger stronger relationship, I suppose, between the local Labour Party here in Croydon. Maybe this is exclusively in the south, where I have a bit more of that kind of knowledge, and our local trade unions, because I do think we could do more to make sure our membership was supporting what trade unions are trying to achieve in Croydon.
I mean, as a movement, the trade union movement can have all different types of levels and extremes, but thankfully, a lot of the trade unions generally have their members' best interests at heart, making sure that there's better working terms and conditions, so on and so forth. We've seen it with a lot of legislation that was brought in by Labour. The Equalities Act 2010 is one of the best examples of that, because it actually brings into the workplace environment. It highlights that people are not all the same. As time goes on, you may have different disabilities, different physical issues. The workplaces need to make sure that these are catered to ensure staff retention is retained. You know, from the world of business, that turnover of staff is not a good thing necessarily.
100%.
But retention, especially if they've been there for a long, don't get me wrong, there's staff members that are bad and you have to get rid of them, especially if they're hurting the business. If they're not, and there's genuinely some workplace adaptations, like maybe a wrist mat for the mouse, that kind of thing, these are the kind of things that trade unions tend to push for, the small battles, as well as the big ones for bigger pay and stuff like that. But I think, with your, what you've got, it is good, because trade union does support you. And we know within Croydon, they've actually got one of the major offices for the Royal College of Nursing in Croydon, in central Croydon area. And I didn't know that. This is actually a really wonderful thing. And they have had a massive impact on how things are done in the country. From your sort of perspective, now that you're looking at all three, the world of business, the world of politics, the world of trade unionism, what do you see as the sort of common denominators with all three of them?
Hey everyone, you might be lucky to get safety boots from your employer. And these are absolutely fine to have, but guess what? They don't necessarily have the right supports, and can leave you feeling aches and pains, especially in your arches at the end of the day, leading to fallen arches. So make sure you get some arch supports. These are useful. They slip into your boot and give the same comfort as trainers, enabling you to walk around all day long, doing all the heavy lifting, no matter what the job is that you're doing, and you won't feel any pain at the end of the day. They will leave you feeling really good at the end of the day, so make sure you order yours at the TikTok shop for the price of less than a packet of chips.
People. I'll elaborate. Yeah, I mean, look, I think people is the big part of all three of those things, and all three are done better when they are done at the service of people and they're done with people, and all three ultimately want to deliver the best for the highest volume of people, and that's how all three of those things will be successful. And even more so if all three of them, are doing that collaboratively with each other and the people that they are there to serve.
Now, this also brings me on to another point about people, because again, you came from a digital marketing background. You're seeing social media used it positively, Facebook and so on, Instagram, Twitter, to put out positive messages all the time about campaigns and what we're doing on the ground. But there is also a lot of negative stuff which is out there. And recently we're seeing the flags would be a best example of it, or misinformation about people are coming in via the boats and so on and so forth, where they put up videos which is not necessarily the case when they're fact checked. Have you seen, well, here's a better question. How would you advise to counteract misinformation based upon your experience?
I mean, look, I think the biggest thing is, and I think if we talk about misinformation, I think it's important to separate some of the elements that you discussed there. So focusing on misinformation rather than those elements, I would say, so look, the best way to, don't shine a light on it. Don't feel the need to defend against it. Put out a positive message of your own, put out factual messages of your own. And always remember that you can't argue with misinformation. Oftentimes people posting it, they're not looking to be corrected, and nothing that you say or do, or nothing that you put in front of them to prove that misinformation is as it is, will change their minds. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that people can make is trying, and you find yourself in a rabbit hole of conversations that go on for hours and hours, or weeks and weeks, and hundreds of comments, where you've just got two people who are repeatedly saying the same thing, and neither one of them is going to give, is going to budge at all. You are much better to spend that time getting a positive factual message out, rather than trying to, argue with people who are never going to listen to, whatever the facts you present might be.
I made that mistake myself many years ago when I was in the professional wrestling industry in the UK, and argued with a wrestler. I was a pro manager at the time. It was on Twitter. And it lasted, it just became a tit for tat. Like what you said, and it lasted hours. It took a lot of time away from me just to try and get the one up. And I was like, but we're arguing for the same point, really, in essence. But it's just one trying to outdo one another. But you're absolutely right. There's a lot of misinformation which is going on out there at the moment, and people are working hard to correct it, but they can't, because some of those people re-believe in that misinformation. If you've ever encountered that on the door, because I know I have, it's hard to deal with a person in that sense. How would you, from your sort of experience, what have you done to deal with someone that has so gone down the rabbit hole?
To be perfectly frank, not a huge amount. I think if I spot early on that somebody is really far down a rabbit hole, I'm probably never going to convince that person that anything else is true. That is a difference between someone being slightly misinformed and open to hearing different viewpoints. It's totally different someone asking genuine questions. It's also totally different from somebody having a different political view than me. And I think that there is a big difference between opposing political views and political views formed by misinformation. Opposing political views, again, probably not going to change someone's mind, in a substantive way after one interaction on the doorstep, or anywhere. Political views informed by misinformation. I think you just get a measure of the type of person that you're speaking to. You might try and put forward, the facts of the matter as you see them. If you spot really early that this person is pushing back and then not conceding any ground, I think it's just a point of going, okay, look, thank you for your time. Have a fantastic day. And away I go and try and speak to somebody who wants to have that genuine conversation. Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because there's a small anecdote where, in the past when I've had that workplace conversation with people that said, yeah, we voted reform because they stand for our, kind of thing. It's like, you're talking to a Pakistani guy here, yeah? Yeah, and? Well, one of the guys in Reform, the chairman at that time, Zia Yusuf, Pakistani billionaire. You had Ben Habib, a Pakistani British guy. And then their eyes suddenly start becoming a bit glazed over. It's like, because it goes against everything that they believed in, that a party like that actually has those kinds of people. Regardless of what their political stances are. You just see the light bulb moment coming on, thinking, huh, was I actually right in what I thought about these guys in the first place? And yeah, just to add that to the sort of mix, the amount of times I've actually said that and people have just been taken aback by it, to the point where they go on their own mobile and see it for themselves. They fact checked it for themselves. It's like,
Yeah.
was this the right people? And it's really weird because politics is going in a weird direction at the moment. In more ways, I'm a Democrat. I believe that the more choice that you have, the better it is. People can then find, it doesn't have to be tribalism. You can have your opinions changed and decide to vote for who you want to vote for. But I think right now there seems to be this staunchness of, I don't know, whether it's a combination of the cost of living crisis, whether it's a combination of lack of resources or mismanagement from, again, I'll be a bit political now, 14 years of Tory party leadership, Conservative party leadership, which was mismanaging. It wasn't there like the Blair and Brown years when we look at business where regulation was there to enhance a business and make sure it's guided in that way. They basically tore up the regulations and the compliance and all the rest of it and made it for the very few that benefited from it, rather than most people who, our entrepreneurs are the big things that will drive businesses forward and the economy forward. Small to medium-sized businesses are the ones that employ people more quickly because of the scaling up, rather than necessarily the big businesses where everyone's going for the paycheck. There's a need to grow small and medium-sized enterprises. So I'm going to go into what you feel the world of politics needs to do to address that, because the trade unions is always doing that within having the accessibility to people like chairmen of the board, being able to talk to them, talk and let them know from the ground up, this is what's going on the ground level. You guys have to apply this to make sure that we're within certain compliance, certain safety issues that may not necessarily be told by the line managers or HR departments, because they're also employees. So the independence and the accessibility part comes in. But from the world of where you now stand, grassroots, what are you seeing? What do you feel can happen or should happen to encourage more entrepreneurship, more businesses to grow and develop and be competitive in this world?
Great question. And I need to start wrapping it up.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
I won't go too deep into this one because it's such a big topic. I think the answer to the question, and it's spread across a couple of things there about grassroots politics and entrepreneurialism. Look, the biggest advice I can give for anybody in any of those things is get involved. Get involved with something, whatever your passion is. That bit work, being in the community, volunteering at a local food bank, getting involved with your local political party, getting involved with a trade union, starting a business, joining a networking group of business owners, even if you're not one yet. Get involved, do something. There is, again, for me, I didn't know it at the time, but the thing that changed my life was stepping foot inside of a food bank. I had no idea the transformation that would take me on over time, but it was that one step that really did. And had I not done that and been involved in that kind of world when the pandemic hit, I may well have just been one of those people who wasn't aware that there was another world operating out there and ended up doing a completely different path. So yeah, that would be my big advice for anything. And kind of wrap up the conversation in a bow is is built by people. So if you want to be part of something, get out there and start doing something.
Which leads me to my final question before I finish this all off, because I do appreciate that you've given me this amount of time, and I do thank you for that. Now, I always finish off on a positive, which is for basically what your opinion is for a better tomorrow. So what do you feel needs to happen to make it for a better tomorrow?
More community power really would be my thing. I think decisions are made best when they're made by the people who they impact the most. I'm really proud to see so many cooperative Labour and cooperative MPs and ministers, secretaries of state inside the chamber making decisions that are giving more and more power back to local communities. And I think that if we can do more of that, get more people involved at a grassroots level, then I think we'll have a country that is really delivering on the priorities of people up and down the nation.
Okay, guys, as you can see, I had to do that. I had to bring it all to an end. Ben, thank you so much. Before I go, as always, whichever platform you're watching this on, give it a like, give it a comment, subscribe, and more importantly, let me or Ben know what you feel should be done by Ben when he is elected as, and I'm saying when he is elected as the local Labour councillor for Thornton Heath Ward. Any kind of comment on in terms of politics that we can use, that we can push things forward to create a better tomorrow is absolutely fine. As always, guys, Ben is Unmatched, and I'm glad to have had him on the Unmatched podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with me. Take care. I'll see you again.
Thank you for tuning in to the Unmatched podcast. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your feedback helps us grow and bring you even more incredible stories. And remember, if you're unmatched in your field and have a unique story to share, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me at hadi.naqvi@googlemail.com. Let's inspire others together.